Welcome back to the deep dive. This is the place where we take, stacks of knowledge, everything from foundational documents to expert on-the-ground wisdom, and we really try to turn it into something you can actually use.
Instantly applicable insight.
Exactly. Our whole goal, really, is to give you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, especially when we're diving into the critical soft skills of coaching.
And today, we are tackling a competency that, people often label it as soft, but it demands some of the hardest internal discipline of all. We're talking about ICF core competency 5.
Which is maintains presence.
Maintains presence.
Right. And it sounds deceptively simple, doesn't it? Like something you should just, naturally have.
Well,
but anyone who's actually tried to do this work knows it is profoundly difficult, especially when the stakes are high or when a client is really emotionally charged, or maybe the path forward is just completely unclear.
And that's why our mission for this deep dive is pretty explicit. We are actively marrying two really distinct but essential perspectives.
Okay.
So, on one hand, we've got the foundational source, the clinical official definition that lays out the what is presence.
It's nuts and bolts.
The nuts and bolts. And then we have this invaluable interpretation from a working expert mentor coach who tells us the why. Why is it so critical? And maybe most importantly, the how. How do you actually master it?
Across the different professional levels, I assume?
And across all the levels. So you should walk away from this understanding not just the theory, but what mastery actually looks and feels like.
I think that distinction it's just critical for every learner out there, whether you're just starting your training or, you're striving for that MCC level.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Why is this specific state of presence? Why is it considered the absolute non-negotiable for coaching? What makes it different from, say, therapy or consulting?
It really comes down to a razor-sharp conceptual line that the foundational documents make very clear. It's this unique combination of intense engagement without personal attachment.
Engagement without attachment.
Right. Their expert we consulted, they described it as the ability to be fully with another human being in an open, flexible, engaging, compassionate way. But, and this is the key part, without attachment, all while, maintaining your own confidence.
That phrase, without attachment, that feels like the real tension at the heart of this whole thing. It means you have to care deeply, but you can't be invested in the client picking a certain path.
Or reaching an outcome that you think is best for them.
Right.
Precisely. The second you get attached to an outcome, you just cease to be present. You start projecting your own anxieties or your solutions or your desire for the client to, just feel better right now.
And at that moment, you're not coaching anymore.
You stepped out of presence and into one of those other roles. You're advising or you're commiserating. Presence means you are trusting the client and trusting the process more than you trust your own ability to come up with the answer.
Okay, that clarity is the key. So let's unpack that foundational definition. The what? What is the state a coach actually needs to inhabit?
So the foundational definition gives us a really powerful starting point. It describes the desired internal state first. It says the coach is fully conscious and present with the client, employing a style that is open, flexible, grounded, and confident.
Okay, grounded and confident. That feels non-negotiable.
It is, because the coaching conversation itself is often, inherently volatile. If the coach isn't grounded, they can get so easily destabilized and pulled off center by the client's drama or their uncertainty.
Before you break down the specifics, you mentioned the historical context of this. If coaching has been around for decades, why did the ICF feel this need to articulate presence with such precision right now? Is this actually a new expectation?
That's a crucial question, really, because it gets at this fear that coaches have to learn a whole new set of skills. But the expert mentor coach we spoke to, they confirmed it really isn't new.
Okay.
Coaching presence has always been there implicitly in the assessment tools. You could see it in the older PCC markers. The shift, as our expert framed it, is mostly one of clearer, more logical organization.
So it's not invention, it's precision.
Exactly. They've taken these underlying qualities that have defined great coaching for, 25 or 30 years. Things like presence, the coaching mindset, trust, and safety. And they've just articulated them much more clearly.
And organized them around action-oriented verbs, I read.
Yes. So it went from being this sort of implicit skill that great coaches just had intuitively to an explicit, measurable set of 6 behaviors that any coach can now study and deliberately practice. And that is a massive step forward for professional development.
That clarity, moving from implicit to explicit, it's essential for anyone trying to master the craft. Okay, so let's dive deep into those 6 specific behavioral elements. What does a coach need to be doing, moment to moment, to really embody that open, flexible, and grounded state?
Well, we can kind of break them down into 3 categories, if that helps. There's observation, there's internal regulation, and then there's what I call space and trust. So the first 2 points, they really focus on observation and curiosity. Point 1 says the coach remains focused, observant, empathetic, and responsive to the client.
And that's way more than just hearing their words.
Oh, it's vigilance. The mentor coach really emphasizes that this means picking up on the verbal and the nonverbal cues that tell the real story, the micro-expressions, a subtle shift in their breathing, their posture, even their vocabulary choice.
Right. So if a client says, oh, I'm totally fine with this decision, but at the same time they're crossing their arms tightly and their voice goes up an octave.
The present coach catches that dissonance instantly. The observant coach doesn't just process the content. They're processing the context. They're noticing, the client just mentioned their mother for the 5th time. Or they see when they suddenly shift their gaze to the floor. This vigilance, it provides the raw material for the next point.
Which is curiosity.
Curiosity, point 2. The coach demonstrates curiosity during the coaching process. And this is the engine of discovery. If a coach isn't curious, they're already operating from a place of assumption.
Right. The coach who isn't present assumes, oh, this client's talking about work-life balance. I know exactly what that means.
And they jump right in. Whereas the present coach asks, what does work-life balance mean for you right now in this moment?
A completely different question.
Totally different. A lack of curiosity, it shuts down the client's ability to explore their own unique internal landscape. When presence falters here, the coach defaults to, a canned question or some generic framework, instead of listening for the unusual word, the unique metaphor, or that surprising emotional shift that demands a genuinely new question.
Okay, so that's the observation piece. Let's shift to what you called the internal game. The next 2 points deal with the coach's own internal regulation and discipline, which I think is often the hardest part when you're faced with a really charged client.
It is. Point 3 is that the coach manages one's emotions to stay present with the client. This is the discipline of presence. It's so easy to define, but my gosh, it is incredibly difficult to execute.
Why is that internal management so critical, though?
Because the moment the coach's emotions take over, the focus shifts. It shifts from the client to the coach. If a coach feels pity for a client's story of tragedy, they might soften their next question. If they feel annoyance, they might rush the client.
And the client picks up on that.
Instantly. The client is highly attuned to the coach's energy. They feel that shift, and the safety of the space is compromised. Managing your emotions means you have to be a reflective, compassionate mirror, not a reactive participant in their story.
And that leads into the 4th point, which builds on that emotional discipline, especially when things get really intense.
Yes, point 4. The coach demonstrates confidence in working with strong client emotions. This is where that grounded and confident foundational state is really tested. When a client starts to cry or shows intense anger or hits a really painful realization, the non-present coach often panics.
I can see that. They might rush to offer a tissue
or change the subject or try to comfort them, all of which are actions that actually disrupt the client's own emergent processing.
So the master coach sees that emotion not as a problem to be solved, but as data to be explored.
Exactly. They hold the space.
Yeah.
They remain the unwavering anchor in the storm. They might just simply say, take your time, or what are you noticing right now as you feel that? They don't shy away from the intensity. They demonstrate confidence that the client can navigate this, and they're just there to witness it. Mastery here means recognizing that strong emotion often comes right before the deepest insight.
Okay, so the next point 5. This is the one we flagged earlier. The one our expert source identified as being, the absolute linchpin of mastery.
It is. Point 5. The coach is comfortable working in a space of not knowing. The expert mentor coach called this a big, big, big thing for a reason.
Why is it so big?
Because new coaches or coaches who are just striving for validation, they often feel their value lies in their ability to know things, to provide structure or insight or direction.
But the core of coaching presence demands the opposite. It demands a profound humanity.
It's a paradox, isn't it? You need the expertise to understand the dynamics of coaching, but you need the humility to be completely ignorant in the moment with the client. If a coach is uncomfortable with not knowing, they will inevitably try to force the conversation into familiar territory.
Or worse, they pull the client toward a solution they came up with 5 minutes ago.
Exactly. The presence is lost the instant the coach stops genuinely listening for the client's next emergent thought and starts searching their own internal database for the right answer.
The fear of not knowing. It's often a fear of appearing incompetent, isn't it? And that fear immediately shifts the coach's focus inward, onto themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The moment your internal monologue switches to, okay, what should I ask next? Or I really hope I'm doing this right, presence is gone. Being comfortable in that space of not knowing is really a demonstration of confidence in the client's internal wisdom. And that's the foundational belief of coaching itself.
And finally, the sixth point. This one relates to the essential tool that makes all that internal processing possible.
Silence.
Silence.
Point 6. The coach creates or allows space for silence, pause, or reflection. For so many new coaches, silence it's terrifying. It's an awkward vacuum that just has to be filled. But for the present coach, silence isn't emptiness. It is the most fertile ground in the entire conversation.
What's actually happening in that silence that's so vital?
The expert really emphasizes that silence is the moment where creation and insight happen. The coach's question has landed, and the client needs time to search their internal landscape to connect an intellectual realization with an emotional truth. If the coach rushes in to fill that 3 or 5 or even 10-second pause,
They steal the client's processing time.
they steal it. A coach demonstrating presence understands that intentionally creating those moments for reflection allows the client to formulate deeper, more integrated insights rather than just spitting out a surface-level reaction.
So those 6 points: observation, curiosity, emotional regulation, confidence with strong emotion, comfort with not knowing, and using silence. They form the measurable standard of what presence is. It honestly sounds like a kind of internal martial art.
It really is. It's this constant discipline of keeping your focus external, grounded, and non-attached. So now that we have the blueprint, let's move to the practical reality of mastery. Let's look at the difference between, reciting the blueprint and actually embodying it.
Okay, so we're shifting from the what to the how, from the definitions to the practical application and true mastery. For you listening, this is where we discuss, what does it actually look like when presence is done masterfully in a real session? And just as important, what are the telltale signs that it's failing?
Right. So the mentor coach offered indicators of mastery that are almost visceral. They're about the energy and the effect the coach has on the client. The first one is about the quality of care.
The quality of care.
The expert described seeing a deep, almost palpable quality of care for the human being that clearly invites the human being to emerge.
Can you help us define that feeling? What does invites the human being to emerge mean in, practical terms?
It means the client feels utterly, completely safe to bring their whole messy, uncertain self to the session. They don't feel judged or rushed or steered in any direction. The coach's presence is so accepting and so grounded that the client feels they have permission to drop the masks, to reveal their uncertainty, and to just stumble toward their own truth. It's a profound respect for the client's agency that just shows up in the coach's tone and pace.
Okay, that sets the emotional framework. Now, what about the active technical mastery, specifically related to that first foundational point, observation?
That leads to the second key indicator, observational acuity. The mentor coach focuses on a really high level of observation. Not just general observation, but noticing emotional or intellectual aha moments the second they happen. The master coach is tracking the client's internal process so closely that they can tell when a new connection is made or when an old defense mechanism pops up.
Can you give us a quick example? High acuity versus low acuity? What's the difference?
Sure. Low acuity might be.
Yeah.
The client is talking about a conflict and the coach says, okay, so what do you want to do next?
Right, moving to action.
Right. High acuity is when the client says, I know I should confront this issue, but... And the master coach immediately observes a fleeting look of deep sadness, and they gently but immediately interrupt.
They stop them.
They stop them. They'll say, hold on, you just said but? What was the emotion that just crossed your face when you thought about confronting it? They address the shift in the moment because that moment is where the real insight is locked away.
And once they notice something powerful like that, they need the confidence to actually pursue it, which I guess connects to the third indicator.
Confident inquiry. The expert looks for comfort and confidence in asking direct, clarifying questions like, hey, what was that about? This shows they're grounded, that foundational state, and responsive, which is foundational point 1. They are not afraid to interrupt the client's surface story if that story is clearly masking a powerful underlying emotion that needs to be brought into the light.
They trust their own observation enough to do that.
Enough to bring the focus right back to the client's internal state, yes.
So let's circle back to that really crucial theme we talked about, foundational point 5, not knowing. How does our expert describe the visible manifestation of mastery here when a coach is completely, genuinely comfortable with not knowing?
This is the definitive indicator of high-level presence. The mentor coach calls it the confidence of uncertainty. When a coach achieves mastery, they have the confidence to step fully into that not knowing space without any anxiety.
So they don't feel the pressure to fill the void or guide the client
Or produce some brilliant creative summary.
No. So if you were auditing the session, you wouldn't hear the coach searching for a framework or a neat takeaway. You'd hear what? Open-ended, almost childlike questions that genuinely reflect a search for truth.
Exactly. And this requires the curious mindset.
Yeah.
The master coach is described as being super curious and, crucially, avoiding congestions.
Okay, let's pause on congestions. That's such a powerful, descriptive term for what goes wrong when presence fails. Audibly, what does a congestion sound like?
A congestion is any suggestion or premature piece of guidance that just clogs up the channel for the client's own emergence.
I see.
It happens when the coach abandons curiosity and reverts back to problem solving. It sounds like you're really struggling with delegating. Have you considered using a project management tool?
Or if I were in your shoes, I might try setting firmer boundaries.
Exactly. That shifts the coach from being a vehicle for the client's emergence to being the expert provider of the solution. Or, as our source said, having to do the work for them.
Right. And when the coach offers a congestion, they are abandoning presence, they're taking ownership of the client's issue, and they're completely shutting down the client's own discovery process.
Precisely. The mastery is in being the vehicle, holding the space, maintaining curiosity. And by doing that, you ensure the client retains 100% ownership of their process and their solution.
That synthesis it's incredibly helpful. So mastery means those 6 foundational behaviors have fused into a single confident state of being that prioritizes curiosity and emergence over the coach's need to, perform.
And if you can recognize mastery, you also have to be able to recognize the pitfalls.
Yeah.
So let's flip the script. If you're listening and trying to diagnose where you might be struggling with presence, what does the opposite, the failure to maintain presence, what does that look like in the room?
Recognizing the pitfalls is often the first and most humbling step toward getting better. So what are the common struggles that the mentor coach identified?
The expert pointed to 2 major struggles, and they both revolve around anxiety, a lack of trust in the process, and a deep discomfort with not knowing. The first major pitfall is rushing to solution.
Which is the total antithesis of curiosity, isn't it?
It is. The struggling coach just goes too fast. They skip the deep exploration phase and jump immediately to the outcome question. Okay, that's interesting. Now what do you want to do about it? They feel this pressure, whether it's internal or external, to deliver an action plan.
And what's the internal consequence of that rushing? For the client, I mean.
The internal consequence is that the coach bypasses the exploration phase. The mentor coach noted this rushing often looks like someone following a mental checklist, just moving mechanically through the process rather than organically following the client's energy.
They fail to flex that curiosity muscle in the middle.
They do. They miss the opportunity to deepen the insight and create real awareness because they're preoccupied with hitting the goal or satisfying the demand for an action item. The session ends up feeling incomplete or superficial.
It sounds transactional. You haven't allowed the client's deeper truth to fully emerge before you start trying to pave a way forward.
Exactly. And the second pitfall relates directly to foundational point 6, the management of space and silence. The expert calls this discomfort with space.
How does that nervousness show up audibly?
It's both visible and audible as anxiety. The coach is rushing, and they talk right on top of the client's responses. They don't give enough space between their own question and the client's answer, or between the client's response and their next follow-up.
So the client hears, "What do you think you should do?" And before they can even finish formulating their answer, the coach is already offering another prompt or the next question.
Precisely. This is the clearest evidence of being uncomfortable with silence, and fundamentally uncomfortable with the lack of knowing what's coming next. They see silence not as a necessary processing tool for the client, but as a vacuum that they, the professional, have to fill immediately.
It's prioritizing the coach's comfort over the client's need.
Yes, the coach's internal comfort over the client's need for reflection and integration.
that inability to tolerate silence it's a really powerful diagnostic tool for any coach. If you find yourself talking right on top of your client, you are likely prioritizing your own need for control or validation over their need for time.
It's the easiest trap to fall into, especially early on. The goal subtly shifts from allowing the client to emerge to proving that I am a competent coach. And the way you prove competence is usually by talking and asking questions.
This analysis of the struggle is the perfect bridge into our next section. Because our expert's contribution didn't just stop at identifying the symptoms of failure, it mapped these very behaviors onto the professional certification levels. And understanding how presence evolves from a conscious technique into an embodied reality.
Yeah.
That feels like the key to understanding professional development and coaching.
This section is so critical for anyone pursuing credentialing. We're going to explicitly detail how those 6 foundational elements, how they change in their demonstration as a coach, moves from Associate Certified Coach, the ACC, to the BCC, and finally to the Master Certified Coach, the MCC.
And the difference is subtle in definition,
but dramatic in execution.
Let's start at the ACC level, the conscious coach, the one who is still very much in the doing phase of the competency.
At the ACC level, we see what we call the conscious effort. The coach knows they're supposed to maintain presence. They've studied the 6 definitions. They get the concepts of curiosity and non-attachment, but they're often still driven by this really intense desire to make a difference and to get to the solution in the session.
So their intention is good, they want to help, but their execution it's hindered by their focus on the outcome. Or maybe that feeling that they have to perform coaching correctly. Let's look at 2 of those key points, utilizing silence, point 6, and comfort with not knowing, point 5. How does an ACC typically demonstrate a deficiency there?
Okay, so regarding utilizing silence, the ACC coach will give space, but tentatively.
Yeah.
It feels like a calculated silence. Maybe it lasts 3 or 4 seconds, and then they jump in because it feels too long, too awkward.
Right. They show a palpable discomfort with the space.
Exactly. It links right back to those struggling behaviors we just talked about.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a natural breath in the conversation. It feels like a deliberate but anxious coaching technique.
And their comfort with not knowing.
That often manifests as a lack of natural curiosity. So if a client introduces a confusing topic, the ACC coach might subconsciously try to force it back into a familiar framework because truly sitting with the confusion of the unknown just feels professionally risky.
Mm-hmm.
They're constantly trying to reconcile the client's messiness with the defined steps of the coaching process they've memorized. The presence feels a little forced, a little tentative, because they're spending so much mental energy just managing their own performance.
It sounds like the ACC is operating from a checklist. I must ask open questions, I must allow silence, whereas the higher levels are operating from I am open and I allow space.
That's the most succinct way to put it, yes. The ACC is focused on the correctness of the execution. Their motivation to solve the problem quickly often overrides that pure state of open-ended presence.
Okay, so moving up the ladder, how does that shift when a coach achieves the PCC level? What does the fluid integration of presence actually look and sound like?
At the BCC level, the contrast is. It's stark. The characteristics are defined by a much more fluid, natural flow.
Yeah.
It no longer looks like the coach is consciously working on the competency. It's just integrated. It's second nature.
They've moved from performing the skill to internalizing it.
Right.
So let's trace those same 2 foundational points. How does the PCC coach use silence and handle not knowing?
In terms of silence, the PCC coach is just naturally comfortable with the space. The silence isn't a technique anymore. It's an intuitive allowance. They'll let the silence run for 5, 8, even 10 seconds because they understand the client needs it for genuine integration. The whole feel of the session is calm, grounded. There's no visible anxiety about the lack of talking.
And regarding the comfort with not knowing, this is where the biggest shift from ACC happens, right?
Absolutely. The PCC level is the definitive achievement of the confidence of uncertainty. They've mastered the discipline of emotional management, point 3, and the confidence with strong emotions, point 4. So when a client tries to shift responsibility, saying, "Coach, what would you do if you were me?" The PCC coach is profoundly comfortable saying,
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. But let's go back to what you were feeling when you first considered that possibility.
That ability to just decline the invitation to be the expert and to pivot right back to the client's own internal wisdom, that feels like the ultimate demonstration of integrated presence.
It is the moment where non-attachment is fully demonstrated. The PCC coach has confidence in the client's ability to find the answer, and they confidently hold that boundary, maintaining their role as the vehicle, not the driver. It all just flows seamlessly because the coach trusts the process implicitly.
This fluid integration, it sounds like the ideal of professional competency. So now we have to tackle the MCC level, the Master Certified Coach. If PCC is already fluid and integrated, where do you find the distinction? Our expert source suggested the difference can be subtle, even esoteric.
That's right. The MCC level is the embodied expression. The distinction is difficult precisely because the mastery is no longer about what the coach does, but who the coach is.
That is a profound statement. How do you even begin to assess something so internal?
Well, at this level, the competencies are no longer visible skills. They're defined as a normal expression of that human. We can't really say an MCC coach is better at asking questions than a strong PCC, but we can say their relationship to the foundational points is completely, utterly unforced.
Okay, so let's apply that idea of embodied expression to a couple of the foundational behaviors. How does an MCC demonstrate, say, natural curiosity or managing emotions?
Curiosity is a perfect example. For the MCC, curiosity isn't something they turn on during a session. It's a natural, continuous part of their personality, their worldview. They approach every single client statement, even the most mundane ones, with fresh wonder.
And managing emotions.
In terms of managing emotions, the MCC coach doesn't just manage them. Their internal system is so grounded that the client's emotions they pass through their presence without taking root. There is this deep, quiet equanimity that serves as the ultimate container for the client's experience.
And what about utilizing silence? Point 6. If the PCC allows space, what does the MCC do with it?
The MCC trusts the silence absolutely, often allowing for substantially longer pauses for reflection. But more importantly, the silence itself often serves as a subtle form of nonverbal communication. The MCC coach knows when to pause their own questioning to let the client process, and they also know when to remain silent, simply to communicate acceptance and depth of focus.
So it's the full, unforced integration of all 6 behaviors.
All of them seamlessly woven into their identity.
So the MCC coach isn't performing the competencies, they're living them. The skills have become their default way of engaging with another human being.
And the mentor coach pointed out that the true hallmark of MCC presence is that the boundaries just blur. The distinction between their professional coaching behavior and their natural human expression, it dissolves. It's the full, unforced confidence in the process, which allows for the maximum emergence from the client.
What an incredible synthesis. We've moved from the technical definition of presence, those 6 behavioral requirements, to the practical reality of mastery. How to spot it in the moment and how to recognize the journey of growth from conscious effort at the ACC level to embodied identity at the MCC level.
And the connective tissue is so clear. The ability to maintain presence, particularly that comfort in the space of not knowing, is the operational link that defines the quality of all the other competencies. If you struggle with presence, everything else, active listening, generating awareness, direct communication, it all suffers.
This has been a fascinating and, well, a really deep journey into Core Competency 5. If we could leave you with one core thought, it's this. Presence is not an add-on. It is the non-negotiable foundation upon which all other coaching effectiveness is built.
Right.
If you lose presence, your active listening falters, your direct communication starts to sound like leading, and your ability to create awareness is diminished by your own internal anxiety.
That's the critical takeaway. The mentor coach we referenced, they noted that maintaining presence involves actively connecting the dots with other core competencies, like coaching mindset and establishing trust and safety. You just can't build a trusting relationship if you aren't present, and you can't maintain a coaching mindset if you're overly attached to the outcome. Presence is the continuous act of putting those foundational beliefs into practice.
So we start with the 6 behaviors. Be focused, be curious, manage your emotions, be confident with strong emotions, be comfortable with not knowing, and allow space for silence. And we recognize that mastery means moving these from conscious efforts, where the focus is on the coach's performance, to fluid integration, and eventually to embodied expression, where the focus is exclusively and effortlessly on the client's emergence.
And that journey is fundamentally about shifting your way of being. It's about letting go of that internal pressure to perform, to fix, or to know.
So here is a final thought for you to carry forward. Building on that profound insight that MCC presence is defined by the skills becoming a normal expression of the person. Think about your last coaching session, or maybe your next meeting where you need to guide someone. What small shift in your way of being, not just a specific technique you try, could move you closer to embodying that confident comfort in the space of not knowing?
Are you willing to embrace the silence fully, without an agenda? Are you willing to prioritize genuine, open curiosity over the temptation of a professional congestion? That willingness, that's where true mastery begins.
An excellent challenge for all of us. We hope this deep dive has given you clarity not just on the definition of presence, but on the profound implications of making it a natural, unforced part of your professional identity. We'll catch you next time as we continue unpacking the core competencies.